The chandeliers burned bright that night, pouring gold across a sea of champagne glasses and silk gowns. Laughter rippled through the hall as Isabella, the bride, my sister, stood at the center of it all, radiant, untouchable. To everyone else, she was perfection. To me, she was a ghost from another life. I hadn't set foot in that world for 10 years, and yet when I walked into her wedding, I didn't need to announce myself. She saw me first. Our eyes met across the room, and in that instant the color drained from her face. Her smile faltered. The queen of the evening suddenly looked like a cornered child. The whispers started before I even reached the head table. Guests craned their necks, confused, curious, eager for scandal. But I said nothing. I didn't go to Isabella. I went to Marcus, her new husband, and in front of everyone I placed a small box at his seat. Simple, elegant, the kind of gift that hides more than it gives. I didn't stay to explain. I just looked him in the eye, offered him a smile, sad, knowing, and turned away. Behind me, I could feel Isabella's panic choking the air. Her hand shot to her mouth, trembling, as though she already knew what waited inside. Everyone else saw a gift. She saw a time bomb. And that was only the beginning. My name is Elena Morrison. I am 34 years old, and I am a child advocacy lawyer. For the last 10 years, I have fought for children who were silenced, abandoned, or forgotten. Because 10 years ago, I was one of them. When people look at me now, they see confidence. They see a woman who holds her own in a courtroom. But that strength was forged out of loss and betrayal. What they don't see is the young girl who once believed family was everything, who believed sacrifice guaranteed loyalty. I used to be that girl. I was the oldest daughter, the dependable one, the one who didn't dream too loudly. When our father's business began to collapse, someone had to hold the family together. That someone was me. I turned down a scholarship I had worked for my entire childhood for. I folded up the acceptance letter like it was a secret sin, and I went to work. Long nights, 2 jobs, every paycheck funneled back into the house so my sister Isabella could keep her private school tuition. She wore designer uniforms while I wore secondhand coats. But I told myself it was worth it. I told myself I was investing in her future, in our family's legacy. Isabella was the golden child. That's not an exaggeration, it's what my mother called her, our golden girl. She had the face, the charm, the talent. Every recital, every pageant, every school award she shone. And me? I was the shadow. The one who cheered from the sidelines, who clapped until my hands ached. The one who made sure the bills were paid so her spotlight never flickered. Everyone applauded Isabella's brilliance. No one noticed the cost of keeping the lights on. But sacrifices aren't invisible forever. They leave scars. And when the dust finally settled, when the business recovered and the inheritance was divided, I discovered what my loyalty was worth. Nothing. The family business that I had quietly kept afloat froze me out. My name was struck from the documents. My share redirected. Isabella, the golden child, was named the sole heir. The same sister I once fed from my own plate now looked me in the eyes and told me it was for the best, that I wasn't business-minded anyway. That was the night I left home, 10 years ago. The night I understood that in my family story, I was never meant to be the heroine. I was meant to be the footnote. And yet, here I am, standing in front of Isabella on the most perfect day of her life. And for the first time, it is not her story that matters. It is mine.
People often ask me, why disappear for 10 years? Why cut all ties? But they don't know what really happened. They don't know how the people I trusted most didn't just fail me, they destroyed me. It started with Isabella. She was 19. Perfect, untouchable Isabella with her flawless grades and her carefully cultivated charm. But perfection has cracks. She had been sneaking around with someone she wasn't supposed to. Someone older, someone our parents would never approve of. And then one night, she found out she was pregnant, terrified, ashamed. She came to me in tears, begging me not to tell a soul. I promised her I wouldn't, because that's what sisters do, isn't it? We protect each other. But our parents, they were never going to let a scandal touch their golden child. Our family was obsessed with appearances. Reputation was everything. Instead of comforting Isabella, they panicked. They whispered behind closed doors, plotting, and in the middle of that storm, I became their convenient solution. Around that time, a small amount of money went missing from the business account. I'll admit it, I took it. Not for myself, but to cover an emergency medical bill for a friend who couldn't afford treatment. I even left a note in the ledger. Temporary, will repay next paycheck. But when my father found the discrepancy, the note was gone, erased. In its place, suspicion, and then accusation. They called a family meeting. I still remember the smell of my father's cologne, sharp and suffocating, the way my mother sat stiff-backed like a judge about to deliver a sentence. My father's voice was thunder. He accused me of stealing, of betraying the family's trust, of funding a reckless lifestyle I didn't even live. He said I was selfish, irresponsible, a parasite feeding off the family business. And Isabella, she didn't say a word, not one word to defend me, not one breath to remind them of the truth. When I tried to speak, my mother cut me down. When I begged them to check the records, my father slammed his fist on the table so hard the glasses rattled. And then he said the words that still burn in my chest. "You have brought shame on this family. We have no daughter named Elena. Leave and never come back." I looked at Isabella then, searching for a flicker of loyalty, of gratitude, of love. But all I saw was fear and calculation. She knew if I stayed, her secret would come out. My destruction was her salvation. So she stayed silent, and I was banished. That night, I left with a single suitcase and $57 in my pocket. Everything I had poured into that family, gone, erased. They told the world I was a thief, a liar, a disgrace. They told neighbors I had run away after being caught stealing, too ashamed to face anyone. I became the family scandal, the whispered cautionary tale. Elena Morrison, the daughter who went wrong. Meanwhile, Isabella carried her pregnancy in secret, and when the time came, she gave the baby up for adoption. Our parents orchestrated the whole thing, quietly, efficiently. Then they rewrote history. They erased me, rewrote her as the golden child reborn, untarnished. The family moved on as if I had never existed. But the final blow, the one that turned my heartbreak into rage, came a year later. I learned what they did with the money from my scholarship fund, the fund I gave up so Isabella could shine. They used it to pay the adoption fees. My future traded to bury her mistake, my sacrifice twisted into her salvation. That was the moment I stopped being their daughter. That was the moment I swore if I ever came back, it wouldn't be as a beggar at their table, it would be as a storm they couldn't control.
10 years. That's how long it had been since I walked out of that house with nothing but a suitcase. 10 years since my name was spat like poison in their mouths. 10 years since Isabella stood there and let me be cut out like a cancer while she carried on with her perfect little life. And in those 10 years, I built myself again, from the ground up. I slept on couches, ate ramen for weeks, and worked 3 jobs at once just to keep the lights on. I clawed my way through law school, one scholarship, one late night at a library desk at a time. Today, I'm a child advocacy lawyer. I stand for kids who have no voice, because once upon a time, I didn't have one either. Every trial, every courtroom win, every child reunited with someone who truly loved them, that was me rewriting the story my family tried to bury me in. And then, one ordinary afternoon, I got a message. It was from Mrs. Callahan, an old family friend I hadn't spoken to in years. She found me online and wrote, "Elena, I don't know if you've heard, but Isabella is getting married to Marcus Davenport. Yes, those Davenports." I froze when I read that name. Marcus Davenport, the son of one of the most respected families in the city. Old money, real money. But more than that, they were known for their philanthropy. They had built foundations for children's hospitals, funded shelters, poured millions into child welfare. A family that preached honesty, service, and compassion. And Isabella? Isabella was marrying into them. The irony nearly made me choke. I read the article Mrs. Callahan linked. There was Isabella on the glossy society page, grinning in pearls and lace, painted as the radiant bride-to-be. The article praised her for her volunteer work with charities, for her selfless devotion to causes dear to the Davenport family. Lies stacked on lies so high you could barely see daylight between them. She wasn't just hiding her past, she had built an empire on the ashes of it. But what twisted the knife wasn't just the picture or the story. It was one line, almost an afterthought. When asked about children, Isabella gracefully explained that she, sadly, cannot have any, but she and Marcus look forward to adopting one day. Do you see it? The cruelty? She had erased that child so completely that she now wore infertility like a badge of honor. She turned her shame into a convenient excuse. And Marcus? God, poor Marcus, stood by her side, smiling, believing every word. That was my breaking point. Because this wasn't about me anymore. It wasn't about revenge or clearing my name or even punishing Isabella. It was about a child who existed. A child's life had been hidden behind my banishment. And if Isabella was willing to stand there and lie about it forever, then that child's truth would be erased. Erased like I had been. And I couldn't let that happen. Not again. Not to them. So I went to the one place I had never stopped guarding, a small lockbox tucked away in the back of my closet. My hands trembled as I pulled it down. Inside was a file, worn at the edges, stuffed with a decade of memories that weren't mine, but were precious all the same. Because after Isabella gave that baby up, the adoptive parents reached out to me, quietly, secretly. They had sensed what I had lost, and they didn't want me to lose everything. Every year, they sent me a letter. And a photograph. Just one, no return address, no full names. Just enough to show me the child was safe, smiling, growing, living. They told me once, the truth doesn't have to be loud, but it deserves to exist. For 10 years, I had protected those letters and photos, not knowing if they would ever matter to anyone but me. I never knew if I would use them, until now. That night, I sat at my kitchen table, the photos spread before me like a timeline of a life my family had tried to erase. A toddler with curls and bright eyes, a school photo with a missing front tooth, a child who looked so much like Isabella that denial would never be enough to hide it. And in that moment, I knew the past was coming to the wedding, not in anger, not in violence, but in truth. And truth, when revealed at the right time, can be the most devastating weapon of all. Revenge is loud when it's clumsy, but dignity, that's quiet. And quiet is what terrifies people the most. I didn't need lawyers. I didn't need to scream or expose them in the tabloids. I needed only the truth, placed in the right hands at the right moment. The kind of truth that doesn't burn everything down in flames. It freezes the air in the room until no one can breathe. So, I began my preparations the same way I handle every case I've ever fought in court, with patience, with precision. I wasn't driven by rage. Rage makes you sloppy. I was driven by something sharper, purpose, and purpose doesn't miss its mark. First, I reached out to the only people who mattered in this decision, the adoptive parents. I hadn't spoken to them in years. My hands shook as I typed the email, wondering if they would even respond. But within hours, my phone rang. Mrs. Green's voice was calm, warm, the same as I remembered. I could almost hear the smile in her words as she said, "Elena, we always wondered if one day this might come." We spoke for hours. I told her about Isabella's wedding, about the lie she had wrapped herself in, about the family she was marrying into. I confessed my fear that if the truth stayed buried, the child might one day look for answers and find only silence. Mrs. Green was quiet for a long time, and then she said, "Our child is happy, safe, loved. That will never change. But truth? Truth should never be the casualty of someone else's pride. If you feel this is the time, we support you. Completely." Her husband agreed. They told me they would write a letter themselves, one that carried no anger, only grace. I could hear the weight of it in their voices. They were entrusting me with something sacred. The next evening, their letter arrived. Short, handwritten, and devastating in its simplicity. Addressed to Isabella and Marcus, it introduced them as the adoptive parents, expressed their love for the child, and gently acknowledged the brave decision Isabella had made a decade ago. No condemnation, no cruelty, just the kind of truth that couldn't be dismissed as spite alone. Now, all I had to do was assemble it, the weapon. But not a weapon of fire, or rage, or even words. No. This weapon would be crafted from silence, from memory, from the kind of evidence no one could deny. I went through the file one photo at a time. A baby in tiny knitted socks, a toddler, fists full of crayons, a crooked smile, a child with scraped knees and bright eyes, a school portrait with a grin that tilted just like Isabella's did at that age. I chose one photo from each year and placed them carefully into a small, leather-bound album I had bought that morning, the kind of album you'd give at a christening or a birthday, a gift that looked innocent, almost delicate, but every page was a blade. Each photo, a mirror, Isabella couldn't shatter. In the very back, I placed the most recent photo, a school picture. The resemblance to Isabella was undeniable. The eyes, the jawline, even the smile she had perfected for cameras. Anyone could see it. Marcus would see it. And tucked neatly into the inside cover, I slipped the Greens' letter. Their words, their kindness, their truth. It was the perfect counterpoint to Isabella's lies, impossible to dismiss as my revenge alone. When I finished, I closed the album and wrapped it in simple white paper with a silver ribbon. Not extravagant, not flashy, just elegant enough to belong at a wedding table, innocent enough to pass for a heartfelt gift. I set it in the small box and tied the bow with steady hands. Then I held it for a long time, feeling the weight of it. This wasn't just paper and ink. This was 10 years of silence, breaking open at last. Meanwhile, across town, Isabella's voice was carrying through a speakerphone as she planned the final details of her grand wedding. I know because one of the old friends who had tipped me off about the wedding couldn't resist recording a snippet and sending it to me. In that shrill, dismissive tone she had perfected since childhood, I heard her laugh. "Oh, don't worry about Elena. She's gone. Ran off years ago, caused drama, stole money, and vanished. Honestly, she probably died in some gutter. I don't even say I have a sister anymore." She didn't even know my address, but her words reached me all the same. And I smiled, not with pain, not with rage, but with certainty. Because while she spoke, dismissing me like a ghost, I was sitting there holding the one thing that would end her empire of lies in a single moment. She thought I was dead. She thought I was gone. But I was alive. And I was coming. Not with anger, not with fire, but with the truth. And the truth has teeth.
The moment felt endless. I watched Marcus set his champagne glass down, his hand brushing against the small gift box I had left in front of him. He glanced at me once, his eyes full of polite confusion, and then curiosity won. He untied the silver ribbon with slow, deliberate fingers. The music swelled around us, Glasses clinked, people laughed, but to me, it all faded into nothing. I could hear only the sound of the lid lifting. When he opened the box and pulled out the leather album, my breath caught. I had seen those photos 1,000 times, but seeing them in his hands was something else entirely. He turned the first page, a newborn wrapped in white, eyes still heavy with the mystery of life. He frowned, puzzled, but not alarmed. Not yet. He turned another page. A toddler with frosting on their face, grinning, cheeks smudged with blue. Then another, a school picture with a missing front tooth. Little League trophies, birthdays, laughter, captured in frozen frames. With every turn of the page, I saw his posture change. Curiosity turned to suspicion. Suspicion to dread. Across the room, Isabella saw it too. I knew the exact second she realized what he was holding. Her shoulders stiffened, the color drained from her face. She excused herself from a cluster of bridesmaids and rushed forward, the lace hem of her gown snagging as she walked too fast. She forced a laugh, high-pitched, false, brittle. "Oh, Marcus, what on earth did she give you? My sister, she always did have a flair for the dramatic. This must be some kind of prank." But Marcus didn't look up. He kept turning pages. When he reached the last photograph, the most recent one, the one where the child's smile tilted exactly like Isabella's at that age, his hand stilled. He stared at it for a long time, his jaw tightening, and then he found the letter, tucked neatly inside the cover. I knew every word by heart, though I had not written it. The Greens had, their handwriting neat, their tone gentle, their truth unshakable. As Marcus read silently, his breathing changed. I saw his chest rise and fall, heavier, slower, as if the words themselves carried weight. "We have loved and raised your child with every ounce of our hearts for the last 10 years. It was a brave decision Isabella made long ago, but truth should never be erased. One day, your child will deserve to know." By the time he finished, the room had shifted. To everyone else, the music still played, the chatter continued, but to around us, there was silence. A silence so sharp, it felt like glass waiting to break. Marcus lowered the letter. His voice, when it came, was quiet, too quiet. "Who is this child?" These words cut through the noise like a blade. Isabella froze, lips parting as though she might invent some excuse, some half-lie to patch the cracks. But Marcus's eyes were on her now, steady, piercing, and there was no room for escape. She stammered, I don't think it's what you look like. She's lying. Elena's lying." But he stopped her with 3 words, each one laced with steel. "Don't lie to me." The room stilled. I saw her glance at our parents, desperate, pleading. They rushed in, fumbling with explanations. My father began, "Marcus, you must understand." My mother added, "Elena has always..." But Marcus raised his hand, just one hand, and silence fell again. He turned the album around and tapped his finger against the photograph. His voice was still low, but it carried the weight of thunder. "This is your child, isn't it?" Her eyes welled with tears. She tried to speak, but no sound came. 10 years of lies pressed against her chest, crushing her into silence, and in that silence, everything she had built, the reputation, the golden image, the perfect marriage she thought she secured, collapsed, not with an explosion, not with fire, but with truth. The kind of truth that doesn't scream, it whispers. And whispers are impossible to ignore. I stood across the room, steady, silent. I didn't need to say a word. My gift had spoken for me. For 10 years, I carried the weight of their betrayal. Tonight, I placed it back in their hands. And as I watched Isabella crumble, I realized the sweetest revenge isn't loud. It's quiet. It's calm. It's the kind of revenge that doesn't destroy you in the process. It just sets you free.
I never saw the moment the wedding ended. I didn't need to.
By the time Marcus's voice cut through that ballroom and Isabella's silence betrayed her, I knew the outcome. There are some truths you cannot walk back from, and this was one of them. I slipped out before the cake was cut, before the music faltered, before the whispers swelled loud enough to drown the violinists. My heels clicked softly against the marble as I walked toward the exit, my pulse calm for the first time in years. Outside, the air was cool, sharp, alive. I remember pausing at the top of the steps, the night pressing against my skin and thinking, it's over. The weight is no longer mine. Inside, I knew the storm was unraveling. The Davenports were an old family, proud and meticulous, the kind who cared more about legacy than wealth. To them, lies were poison. Reputation was everything. And Isabella had handed them poison wrapped in satin ribbons. The wedding, I later heard, was quietly called off before dawn. No screaming announcements, no grand scenes, just a quiet surgical severing of ties. The scandal spread on its own, rippling through our social circle, burning away everything Isabella and my parents had built. She had spent years crafting an image of perfection, the perfect daughter, the perfect bride, the perfect future. But perfection is fragile. It only takes a hairline crack to shatter the glass. And in the end, she wasn't left with a husband or a fairy tale or the applause of society. She was left with the truth. The same truth she had run from, buried, hidden behind polished smiles. And truth does not go away. It waits, patient, sharp, inevitable. For me, revenge wasn't watching her collapse. It wasn't staying to bask in the chaos. My victory was quieter. It was the steady exhale as I walked away, the knowledge that I had returned the weight of her choices to her hands. I didn't need to destroy her. She would do that all on her own now that the truth was out. Months later, a package arrived on my desk at work. Plain brown paper, no return address. Inside, wrapped carefully, was the leather photo album. The ribbon I had tied was gone, but the pages were intact, each one a reminder of the night that changed everything. Tucked inside was a folded note, short and precise, written in Marcus's steady hand. Thank you for the truth. Some foundations are not meant to be built upon. I read it twice, and then again, and for the first time in a long time, I smiled. Not a smile of triumph, not even relief, just something softer, a recognition. Marcus had walked away too. He had seen what I saw, that lies are not a foundation for love, that sometimes the bravest act is not holding on, but letting go before the rot spreads. Life moved forward, not fast, not in leaps, but in steady steps. I poured myself back into my work, into the fight that had always defined me, protecting children whose voices had been silenced, whose truths were inconvenient to the world around them. I stood in courtrooms, I drafted petitions, I spoke for those who hadn't yet learned how to speak for themselves. And every time I faced another battle, I carried with me the lesson of that night, that truth is not a weapon you hurl, it is a torch you hold steady, even when others try to smother it. In the quiet hours, I would sometimes think of Isabella, of the silence that fell between her and Marcus, of the way her eyes filled with tears when the truth pressed too heavy to deny. But I did not think of her with bitterness anymore. What happened that night was not just her downfall, it was my release. Because revenge, real revenge, is not about watching someone burn. It is about walking away from the ashes untouched. It is about reclaiming the narrative they tried to steal from you. It is about peace. And finally, I was free. Free from their judgment, free from their lies. Free to live, not in their shadow, but in my own light.
I walked away that night and never looked back. My heels carried me into the dark, and though the music of the wedding still echoed behind me, I knew my part of the story was done. But here's what gnaws at me still. The secret wasn't only Isabella's. It wasn't only mine. It belonged to someone else entirely. A child who had no voice in the matter, no say in whether their story stayed hidden or came out under a chandelier in front of strangers. That is the piece that keeps me awake some nights. Did I do it for justice? For truth? For them?
Or was it, in some quiet corner of my heart, for revenge? Because the dilemma is not simple. On one hand, you could argue the truth was owed to Marcus. He had the right to know who he was marrying, the right to see what kind of secrets were being buried under his future. To keep that from him would be to build a marriage on quicksand. On the other hand, what about the child? They were safe, loved, cared for. Did I rip their story open too soon? Did I turn their quiet truth into a weapon in a war they never asked to fight? And then there's Isabella herself. She lied, yes. She erased me, yes. But she was also a girl who made a choice at 19, who carried the shame of it in silence, and who tried, however selfishly, to rewrite her past. Did I shatter her life because she deserved it, or because I wanted her to feel the pain she once inflicted on me? So I leave this to you. When a lie is crafted to protect a reputation, but in doing so it erases someone else's history, does the truth deserve to come out, no matter the cost? What would you have done in my place? Would you have opened the box knowing it would free one person but wound another? Or would you have left it sealed forever, sparing the child, sparing the groom, even your sister, at the cost of your own silence? Be honest with me in the comments below, because this isn't just my story anymore. It's a mirror, and the reflection staring back at you, that's yours.